Delta State, one of Nigeria's major oil-producing states, with a population of over 4 million people, was ranked in 2010 as the third largest state in Nigeria in terms of GDP. As part of the Niger Delta, the state has had its share of unrest caused by militants across the past 2 decades. But gradually, the big heart of the nation has progressed from a long history of violence and disarray to a safer and conducive place to live and invest. The man who has guided Delta State through this process of stabilization and further development since 2015 is Governor Ifeanyi Arthur Okowa. We had a chat with him at the Government House.
Well, I did graduate quite early from the from the university, and it did happen that in my place, the youths from my community came up as a group, and they needed me to come in to play politics. Initially, I hated it. I didn't want to be part of it, but with the consistent pressure that came in, I found myself yielding to them. Somehow, I realized that even in the medical profession, my goal was to try to impart on lives. And with time, I found that through politics, I could actually impart on many more lives. Initially, I said, let me give it a try, and I found myself in there since then. My tenure as a local government council chairman gives me a clearer understanding of the people I'm working with and how they ought to go. So in terms of an advisory capacity, I've had a lot of exposure, and then I'm able to help guide them. Then coming in as governor, having been commissioner in various ministries, I was quite active. And more particularly as secretary to the state government, you're actually the one that coordinates the various ministries. So it's giving me quite a lot of exposure.
Do you think that might prompt you to actually want to do too much? The fact that you then
no, I
tend
to guide the people to be able to become more efficient. Right. And they realize that, and they are happy about it. But it also puts the people that work with me as commissioners, special advisors, or any other position. If you're going to do any work and you're going to progress it to my office, you need to be sure you've done your work thoroughly, because that thing is there. He's likely to have met this kind of situation at this point in time. So it actually puts you on your toes. You want to really work hard to be sure that what you're progressing to me is such that it can truly stand the test of time. So it actually increases efficiency and effectiveness. That my time, the tenure I had in the Senate, gives me a much clearer understanding about the legislative and how to relate to them and how to guide their processes. It's quite good. I don't know why God took me through all this, but I think that there was a purpose for it. And to a very large extent, I think that there's still a lot to learn, but God has actually exposed me to a whole lot of things concerning government and governance in Nigeria. And I can only think that is more of a plus than a negative in any aspect of governance you're talking about. Yeah. Without creating an opportunity for them to be engaged, you're also not giving them hope, and then the cooperation cannot last for too long. So we had to marry it with this, provide the infrastructure, begin to provide them with an alternative. If you can't engage them in government because the government was already full, and it's not the right thing to do to continue to fill up the government with people. But with the funds that we're freeing, we needed to start growing our youth in terms of skills training, in terms of youth agriculture entrepreneurship. And we've been running a lot of circles of this, and there are a lot of youth, several thousands of youth that have been engaged through this process. And then what you now begin to see is that oh, my brother, my sister, it may not be myself yet, but my brother, my sister has begun to have a success in his or her career. So there is hope for me. So you are exiting some people because they are already into the entrepreneurship program and they are started off on their own fully by us as a state with mentorship to ensure that they have success stories. And those who may not yet have had their turn are hopeful that it's going to get to them tomorrow, and it's quite good. Beyond that too, we have also tried to begin to pay a lot of emphasis on technical education because we think that that's the way to go, where people are able to acquire skills and they're able to use their brain. We in our technical schools, which they were completely ignored before, we had just 6. But what we did was to overhaul the technical schools fully, get it properly equipped, get the teachers retrained, and then the population, a lot of persons now are beginning to access these technical schools. And in the technical schools, we also teach the conventional subjects, so you don't lose out anything. Rather, you're beginning to gain by having access to being able to be tooled with skills. And we're driving that process very strongly and insisting that in our polytechnics, in our universities, you must also offer entrepreneurial studies. So that we begin to get our youths to understand that it's not just about going through school, carrying a certificate on paper, and you don't want to use your brain. That cannot work. And we think that there is a success story along that line, but the success is going to be more, the impact is going to be felt in a few more years because a lot of these persons with this mindset to be able to work with their own hands and their brains together are going to be out there in the streets, and the impact will be good for our state.
And they'll end up employing others.
Yeah, they end up employing others. We begin to think outside just oil because they begin to think of what they can do for themselves and for their state. And I think it's just good for us. So we're actually paying a lot of attention into skill acquisition, and it's being handled in various forms. We have a job creation officer's office where we do regular programs. We have a technical and vocational education board, which was created by us through a legislation and is running effectively. And they also manage vocation centers where we train a lot of our youths beyond the ones being trained by the Chief Job Creation Officer. The whole idea actually came up more while I was in the Senate, and I was just thinking, what can we truly do for this set of persons? Because when you look at the health indices, it's not good for Nigeria. Delta State may be likely better when you're looking at the Nigerian nation as a whole, but even then it's not good enough. And in the Senate, we worked hard. We had the National Health Insurance Scheme, which was not functioning properly because they are there as of today. Why I say it's not functioning properly, it started since 2004, but we have less than 10% of Nigerians engaged in the health insurance scheme. So something is obviously wrong. And we tried to push on that. We had a lot of difficulty, but through the National Health Act, it was a bill then. I found that the bill had gone through the National Assembly twice in the past and failed. So I had to look through it, rework in such a manner, probably with my background as Commissioner for Health and what I do understand as a medical doctor. We're able to rework the bill, do the lobbying as necessary, and we're able to get it passed. And in that health bill, beyond the regulation of the healthcare industry, we had to bring in a clause that there must be provision for what they call a basic healthcare fund, basic healthcare development fund. And that insisted that at least 1% of the consolidated revenue of the federal government must be devoted to primary healthcare delivery. And within that 1% of the fund, which runs into billions of naira, 50% of it should be set aside for the vulnerable in terms of being able to provide them with healthcare insurance. Unfortunately, it's been signed into law since December 2014, but it's not until this year before they provided funds. But even funds have not been released. But coming into the state, I felt that I needed to show an example, and within the first 2 weeks, really, we did send a bill to the House of Assembly, and it's been signed into law since 2016, and that law creates the Delta State Contributory Health Care Commission. And that's through that program now, we're trying to ensure that as many Deltans as possible access health care. But from the beginning, we insisted that the premium for all pregnant women and all children under 5 must be taken up by the state government, because these are the vulnerable group and we need to touch their lives. We need to change the narrative at that level. And since January, after we've established January 2017, the state government has been paying the premium. It's running very, very remarkably. As of the last time I did check the numbers, we did have about between 72 and 73,000 pregnant women enlisted in the program. Of course, you know that they were exit from time to time, some others who come in, and over about 85,000 children under 5 enrolled in the program. And before we came in, there was what they call the free health care for children under 5 and pregnant women, but it was restricted only to the government hospitals. But we have decided to move it to a more realistic and more sustainable by law, that's this through the healthcare insurance, and we have also expanded it to people being able to access healthcare not only through the government hospitals, but through 107 accredited primary healthcare centers and through some selected private hospitals. So the program itself is running very well, and then including the civil servants. In 1 year plus, we have well over about 300, 2 weeks ago, as of 2 weeks ago, we had about 312,000 persons already enrolled, and that's a good start for us, because our projection is that in the first 4 years, from the start, we're hoping that we should be able to do a minimum of 25 to 30%, and we think we're on course to do that. The politics of this country, we desire a lot of changes. I think that there is the need to strengthen the various parties to ensure, by legislation and by the will of the people, we need to strengthen the political parties to be sure that we actually offer internal democracy. Because without achieving a democratic process within the parties, you actually cannot achieve a democratic process when it comes in between the parties, when we're talking about the Independent Electoral Commission. So, but you find that likely in many parties, the process is still weak. We hope that it gets strengthened by the day, but some of us, by God's grace, have tried to show a lot of examples.
They've been in existence.
Yes, but that way I use the language, the willpower to do so. It's not that we don't know what to be done, but people don't just want to do the right thing. But that is the frustration we see along the line. But here in Delta State, people do know, and they can attest to that our primaries here were very fair, free, and credible. And by God's grace, by the time we had the opportunity to run as chairman of the National Convention of our great party, we did our best to run a credible process. And that's why at the end of the day, you found that every of the 12 contending aspirants came on board, and there's no dissenting voice, there was no criticism, people were satisfied with the process. It helps you to build peace within the party, and once there's peace within the party, it becomes easier for you to manage the process between inter-party processes. And I think that it's very important that we begin as a nation to find ways to strengthen the parties, to enhance internal democracy is very, very, very critical for us to be able to move forward. But generally, politics in this country is still tough. It's not just like what you see in the first world countries, because there's a whole lot of dependence on the candidates themselves to be able to fund electoral processes. That's not what you see overseas. You see people truly donating money to your campaigns. But here, a whole lot of factors are involved. And we have not yet departed from where we are, and we're hoping that we will be able to grow by day. But it will require the deliberate effort of the elite in this country. It requires all of us the deliberate effort to begin to educate and re-educate our people and create that environment that will enable them take ownership of both the party processes of the parties and also of the government. Realizing that until they become contributors in the process of electioneering, they may not actually be strong enough to become a voice when governments are put in place. And these are things we must do, but we're still very far from where we ought to be.